Scatman's World.
Great musical artists come and go as time moves on, arriving and departing in much the same way that our musical tastes themselves fluctuate throughout the years. From this shifting tide of individuals occasionally emerges someone truly unique who manages to persist even after their time has come and gone, be it through use of impressive skills, an innovative style, an endearing personality, or a multitude of other traits. Some are even lucky enough to have been able to pioneer their own style or method, which on occasion allows them to inspire others to do great things themselves. Among these few artists is a man whose name may not be familiar to all who hear it, but whose influence remains even today. This is Scatman's World, the story of Scatman John. John Paul Larkin was born on March 13, 1942, in El Monte, California. Throughout childhood, John was frequently inconvenienced and targeted due to the severe stutter he had developed, a stutter that he would later turn to his advantage. At age 12, John started to play piano, which allowed him to express himself without using his voice, saying that he hid behind the piano because he was too scared to speak. Several years later, John learned about the art of scat singing by listening to various musicians of the time, although this interest would remain hidden for many years. In the 1970s and 80s, John made a living with his piano skills, becoming a professional jazz pianist and performing in a number of venues in and around Los Angeles. John's first recorded album was not in his own name. Rather, he played piano to accompany Sam Phipps on the 1981 album Animal Sounds. However, in 1986, John released the first album of his own design, even going so far as to give it his own name, John Larkin. However, John Larkin's career as the Scatman was yet to begin. In 1990, John moved to Berlin in hopes of advancing his career. While in Berlin, John continued to perform at jazz venues, although he still shied away from vocal performances. However, over time, and after being inspired by a standing ovation he received for a performance, John finally began to integrate his now famous scat singing into his act. The success of John's performances motivated his agent, Manfred Zaringer, to propose the unique idea of combining John's scat singing with electronic dance music, which was becoming popular at the time. Initially, John was apprehensive, worried that he would once again be mocked and criticized, but the idea was eventually accepted. John was primarily worried that listeners would discover for themselves that he had a stutter, which might not have been immediately apparent in his music. His wife suggested that instead of waiting for listeners to realize his stutter themselves, John should instead address the fact directly in his music. In late 1994, after taking this advice and working with several dance producers, John released his first and possibly his most well-known single, Scatman. In the now famous song, John demonstrates, with his lyrics, that he has moved past his fears, saying that everyone stutters one way or the other, and embracing his problems to show that, if the Scatman can do it, so can you. After the song's release, John Larkin took on the role of Scatman John. Throughout 1995, Scatman charted highly across the globe, reaching #1 positions in multiple countries and selling over 6 million records worldwide. In the same year, Scatman John released Scatman's World, which, while not as wildly successful as Scatman, still charted very well and sold close to 1 million copies. Soon after, Scatman John released an album of the same name, which also went on to reach top 10 positions in several countries. In just a few months, Scatman John had achieved worldwide fame, and he went on several promotional tours in Europe and Asia, one of which was so popular that John stated he couldn't start the song because the kids screamed for 5 minutes straight. However, by 1996, Scatman John's worldwide popularity had begun to die down. Scatman John released another album entitled Everybody Jam this same year, and although it failed to replicate his original international success, the album experienced a surprising level of success in Japan, a country where Scatman John soon became more famous than he had ever been in the US or Germany. The Japanese release of Everybody Jam included 5 bonus tracks, all of which were commissioned by Japanese corporations, and many of these were actually quite successful. Scatman John was so popular in Japan that the creators of the Ultraman franchise released a single based on John entitled Scat Ultraman. Scatman John even had his likeness printed on Coca-Cola cans. In 1998, Scatman John was diagnosed with lung cancer, although he continued performing despite this. In 1999, John released what would be his final album, Take Your Time. This same year, John set off on a 24-city tour across the US. However, during the finale of a show in Cleveland, Ohio, John collapsed on stage and was brought to the Cleveland Clinic, where his condition was temporarily stabilized. After returning to his home in Los Angeles in a severely weakened state, John was quoted saying, "Whatever God wants is fine by me. I've had the very best life. I have tasted beauty." John died at his home on December 3rd, 1999, at the age of 57. Throughout his life, Scatman John received a number of awards and recognitions, including Best New Artist at the Echo Awards in Germany and the American Speech Language Hearing Association's Annie Glenn Award, along with induction into the National Stuttering Association Hall of Fame. Even after his death, Scatman John's legacy carried on. His songs are still well known, and Scatman remains a staple of dance music. In more recent times, Scatman John's music has seen spikes in internet popularity, first with YTPs in the late 2000s, and most recently with the popular Scatman's World meme based around the song of the same name. And so ends the story of John Paul Larkin, Scatman John, the man who took his greatest fear and, in his own words, turned it into his biggest asset. Hopefully, John's story can inspire others to embrace their problems and become something greater than they once were. In the words of John himself, as a matter of fact, don't let nothing hold you back. If the Scatman can do it, brother, so can you.
Calling out from Scatland, I'm calling out from Scatman's World. If you wanna break free, you better listen to me. You've got to learn how to see in your fantasy. I'm calling out from Scatland, I'm calling out from Scatman's World. If you